Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Over the last couple of years, Blue Marine Foundation, has conducted research to develop a framework that can assess future fisheries transition scenarios with a focus on transitioning from mobile gear fisheries. And this is really in the light of the general recognition and acknowledgement that reduction in higher impact fishing activities is necessary if we were to achieve our fisheries environmental targets and requirements, as was discussed yesterday. Blue Marine Foundation is a marine conservation charity. For those of you who don't know us, these are our three main goals, or strategic goals. And this piece of work, although ties into all three, predominantly fits under that goal 2, with a focus on supporting sustainable, equitable use of marine resources. But what is a just transition? And I think the concept of just transition really arose back from the US trade union movements back in the 80s and 1980s, and has since gained significant traction in economic and policy circles. Initially used as a program to support those workers who lost their jobs due to environmental protection policies. However, over time, it's become associated with the effort to plan for and invest in environmentally and socially sustainable jobs, sectors and economy, whilst also ensuring that all of society is brought along in the process. However, although adopted widely, there's still no universally accepted definition. There's mention of it within the Paris Agreement around it should be realised according to nationally defined principles. We've seen the creation of a just transition mechanism in Europe back in 2020, and that provides dedicated resource to those facing challenges with high emission. And it's been mentioned in several of these sort of treaties and policy pieces over the years. But when it comes to sort of just transition in fisheries, there's very little information. We're hearing the phrase just transition in fisheries more frequently, being used by everyone, by government, by managers, by regulators, by industry, by ENGOs, particularly in the backdrop of the current conversation around delivering targets, commitments to net zero, increased offshore wind or energy development, increased competition for space. When it comes to the practicalities of a just transition in fisheries, such as who, where and how it's undertaken, these are ill-defined. And to progress our understanding of a just transition within UK fisheries, we have worked with environmental economic consultants, FTEC, to develop a framework to understand the costs and benefits of just transitions away from bottom towed or higher impact fishing activities to lower impact marine activities. So including looking at alternate fishing methods, but also looking into the other sectors or the parts of blue economy, such as marine energy or tourism or recreation. So this is the framework itself. It's designed to take you through in stages. It assesses the costs and benefits of different transition scenarios. The scope, the first stage really is a general information about the area and activities taking place and identifies the scope of potential transition options. The baseline data, this goes into sort of the coverage of the data needed, but also importantly available for the analysis. Background information on existing environmental, social and economic baselines about the current fishery and also its economic value. And it goes without saying at this stage, the more data you can input, the better, and it's also a really helpful stage to identify any of those data gaps. The next stage is the initial modelling. So this really focuses on the static assessment of the first order changes in the short term within that transition option. So it really looks at immediate impacts the proposed change will make, so things like cost, catches, profitability, catch per unit effort. Also looks at including material costs here of the transition options, so any manufactured capital, so fishing boats or gear, any human capital, other training requirements, and also looks here at the indirect impacts, so things like markets, processing supply chains, and jobs. The next stage moves into the dynamic impacts and timescales. This really moves beyond the initial impacts and transitions to consider those dynamic effects through response to habitats and species. So this really focuses on those costs and benefits over a longer timescale, including habitat and stock recovery. So the extent, amount and speed of habitat and stock recovery. It also looks at potential market responses, so any external responses to the changes. So will market prices change? Will supply chains change? Any difference between live market versus frozen or dead dead market, as well as any potential displacement and unintended consequences. So could there be impacts on other species via bycatch? Could there be impacts on change or food or changes in the food chains as well? The final stage then goes into the transition outcome. This is the overall assessment of the costs and benefits of the proposed transition. It includes a cost-benefit analysis of the short-term immediate and the longer-term dynamic costs and benefits, and also addresses other socioeconomic outcomes around employment. So quality and diversity of employment, resilience of employment, job satisfaction, wider impacts on local communities. And at this stage here, it looks at the physical assessment. So these are really just the physical units of things like catches, landings, average sizes, number of vessels, days at seas, fuel use, markets, and then moves into the economic assessment, which is really the translation of the physical assessment into monetary units. So landings, value, turnovers, cost, profitability. We also wanted to understand what outputs this framework could produce. So to do this, we applied the framework in a number of hypothetical fishery transition scenarios. And these scenarios are really based on our current understanding and knowledge of UK fisheries, transition options, some costs. And this provided some valuable insights on the process of assessing different transition scenarios and highlighted some of the framework's limitations, but also some future recommendations for use. So based on that, and with a sort of overarching focus on transitioning away from bottom-towed fishing, we identified probably, there might be others, but 3 possible or main or likely transition scenarios. One is a change of catch method within the same fishery. So for example, this could be looking at nephrop trawls, so prawn trawling to potting for prawns, so going from one method to catching prawns to a static, so mobile to static. The second method is moving from a different target stock or area. So it could be, this is just one example, it might not be feasible, but demersal fish to static. And the final one was looking at moving to a different industry. So it could be scallop dredge to offshore wind or recreation. Whilst we set out to develop this framework that focused on understanding costs and benefits of moving away from bottom-towed fishing, and following applying it to varying scenarios, it did highlight that this framework is equally applicable to a range of other applications. So it could be applied within the inshore static sector to support transitions to more sustainable, fuel-efficient, greener methods. It could also be considered through development of regulatory impact assessments. It could be used to inform options following any displacement. We've heard a lot about the competition for space, but any displacement from activities like offshore wind energy or development. And I think it could be used in the sense of around diversification. So can it inform costs and benefits of moving to other gears, technologies, other fisheries? So from this piece of work, we've learned quite a lot. A just transition in fisheries requires a multifaceted approach that addresses environmental, economic, and social dimensions. And what's key here, and we've heard it a lot the last couple of days, is the involvement of stakeholders, involvement with stakeholders early on in the process. It also involves the understanding of the scale and costs and benefits and who and what will be impacted, and along with that, understanding the jobs and income of current fishing activity and the scale and timing of potential alternative options. It also requires access to robust data. We know that currently there's some of the gaps in data in terms of inshore and offshore fisheries. We don't have a lot, and also careful planning and investment. I think for us, we hope that in future this framework can be utilised to help provide information for informed management decisions, to help provide a fair and equitable route to transition. And I think the phrase yesterday was termed enable as well. So I think we hope that this can enable a fairer and more equitable route to transition, which I think is important given this, the current context and marine space that everyone is operating in. And finally, I think just to finish up, I think a key part of this, I think we believe, is adoption of transition principles into national policy on spatial management will help to achieve, a fairer and more equitable route to transition. Thank you.